Together, our centering prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, may your will be done through me. You may be seated. In Paul Simon's famous 1970s hit, Kodachrome, he laments his days as a student. I think many of you know the first line of this song. When I look back at all the crap I learned in high school. Now, please note that I am a preacher, so I can use Bible words. And I assure you, the word crap is in the Bible. I will show you later. Although, to my underage children who may be listening, you don't get to quote that particular version just yet. Nonetheless, Kodachrome, as you may know, is about the distortion of reality between what we've experienced in the past and how we perceive it today. As we know, human memories are notoriously unreliable, which is why so many of us have been rooting for the Lions for so long. But I am particularly joyed this morning to invite us to look into our fraught memories, to remember the teachers in our lives, those who taught us all that crap, or to be fair, when we remove the distortions, all that invaluable stuff we use every day, like counting the minutes until the sermon is over, or reading the memes on the internet, or writing in cursive, which, to be fair, nobody does anymore. But where would we be without our teachers? Remembering is so important, my friends. Were we to boil down the Bible into just a few words, I have no doubt that one of those words would be remember. God is continually asking you and me to remember the many benefits we enjoy. Remember those times when God walked beside us, provided for us, got us out of an impossible jam, and sent us head coach Dan Campbell. Specifically this morning, though, we want to remember how God has used those special people who decorated bulletin boards, bought school supplies out of their own salaries, and headed classrooms that shaped, formed, and molded us. And let us not forget those teachers who did not frequent classrooms, but were mentors and guides, who gave us great advice, advanced our learning, gave us invaluable street smarts that helped us get to where we are today. In remembering our teachers, we remember our great teacher. After all, this is one of Jesus's main jobs. In today's gospel, that's the name the disciples used when they talked to Jesus. Teacher. In this way, I invite you this morning to think about and to give thanks for your teachers. Think of the holiness of your teachers, the ways God has used those gifts of patience and intelligence and actually modeled in the flesh God for us in the form of teachers. My kindergarten teacher was named Miss Lindemann, and she taught us how to hold crayons before I taught the class how to eat them, or at least use them as spoons to eat the paste. While she no doubt taught me letters and numbers, one of the hackneyed catchphrases you hear around the instructional profession is that more is caught than taught. In other words, kids may listen to what you have to say, but they will definitely observe what you're doing. Reminds me of the Maya Angelou quote so many of you know. People never remember what you said to them, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And Miss Lindemann made me feel amazing. When she listened to you, she gave you 110%. She cared about what you had to say, no matter how kooky. Case in point, my kindergartner-to-be, taking after his dad, bragged to me just the other day, "Do you want to hear me spell Kentucky Fried Chicken?" I said, "Sure." He said, "KFC." Miss Lindemann would ask follow-up questions the next day on the activities you told her about the day before. She listened, and she was ever so patient with things like my insistence that flip-flops were more than adequate for tobogganing. Her smile, her soft words, and gentle way of guiding students is what she left with me. That is before she committed that cardinal sin. She got married and changed her name. She's now Mrs. Price, and as a testimony to the real investment that she had made in her students, just a few years ago, she friended me on Facebook. What do these virtues of deep listening, authentic care, and long-standing devotion say to you and me about how we model God's persona as a teacher in our lives? Are we paying more attention to the reality that more is caught than taught, and being that example of kindness and patience and love? You know people are watching you. Instead of my constant litany to my children, do what I say, not what I do. More people are watching you than you know. How is God calling you to walk the talk, to preach what you practice? After kindergarten and Miss Lindemann / Mrs. Price, it was off to grade school and Miss Liebreth. She was actually my second grade teacher because my first grade teacher, a rather stern and sour old woman at St. Hugo's, who will remain nameless, was memorable for different reasons. Yes, she carried a meter stick. She knew how to raise her voice, and we were all convinced she'd received her teaching certificate from Third Reich University. But Miss Liebreth, my second grade teacher, who would also go on to commit that unpardonable sin and get married mid-year and become Mrs. Yurkevich. I mean, come on. Price we could handle, but Yurkevich, when you're learning to spell? While she was also kindly and thoughtful and gentle, she would also instill in us a sense of responsibility. You're in second grade now. We had all been given gifts, and we were not just to bask in their light and warmth, but we were given those gifts to share. Under her instruction, we learned important values: honesty, sharing, kindness, and to think we did all of this without having the 10 Commandments posted on the wall. As you've heard this week, the politicians in Louisiana are making teachers do just that, which would be a great idea as an amendment to that law. Were first to have the politicians list how many of those commandments they'd broken. This, of course, would keep me from running for office. Nonetheless, the genuine modeling that you teachers do when it comes to instilling responsibility, not lying, honoring your parents by making them cards, writing letters, and hopefully teaching us not to commit armed robbery, at least in second grade. For me, that was the year these lessons of being accountable for your gifts was made real. I wonder what you're doing with your gifts this morning. Sure, God gave them to us to enjoy, and certainly we came here this morning to give thanks for them. But how are we sharing them? How are we being responsible for what's been entrusted to us? Are we coasting? Are we taking seriously the limited number of hours, days, weeks, and months that we have left? Is God asking you to make a deeper commitment to share your gifts? And how? How, like our teachers taught us, are we thinking about those around us as we make our way through life? Because our teachers knew that the best life is the life you give away. Fast forward to fall of 1976, when high school began. I got to trade an 8th grade class of 18 kids for an incoming class of 180. We were fresh off the nation's bicentennial celebrations. Bell bottoms and disco were in the air, and being 6'2" and 110 pounds, soaking wet, with a voice that cracked, I was in great shape to to tackle a school where I knew 4 people. A required class was religion, which I took from Brother Kappas, whose unending patience is what stays with me today. In fact, as a reminder of that patience and the wholesale capricious and ironic nature of life, to this day I have my first semester report card framed on my desk at home. It's the one that rates my knowledge of content in religion class as failing. I don't expect that to be a surprise to most of you. However, I do hope that it will be an inspiration, that when God calls you to do something, you may be a failure in the eyes of the world, but not to God. God may put you in a job or other situation and you don't feel equipped. You don't feel suited. You don't feel meant for it. You may be asking, God, why am I here? But that's okay, because God doesn't call the equipped. God equips the called. Brother Kappas, showing the patience of God, helped me get through St. Augustine and Paul Tillich, and while I had neither interest nor aptitude, God had other plans. And I was not soured to the field, thanks to that dear brother's persistence and patience. If there's ever a good lesson to pick up at an early age, especially for you young ones who are full of energy and ideas, but may have no clue as to the best way to direct them, the best advice is to take a chill pill. Don't freak out if you fail, or better yet, don't freak out when you fail. Nobody is good at any time the first time they try it. Michael Jordan missed his first free throw, but God is faithful. Growing up takes a long time. Some of us are still doing it. And during that time, God is shaping and molding you through the teachers that come across your path. That's what happened when I got out of college and started experimenting in the grown-up world with a term I'd heard bantered around in college called a career. This is when I met a mentor named John Lansing, the news director at WWMT Channel 3 in Kalamazoo. By that time, I was a budding wannabe TV reporter, and John took the time to meet with me, to give me advice, to critique, and eventually offer me a job. I was hired in 1987 as a full-time employee at WWMT. They figured I could be a reporter for 3 days a week, and then I could be a photographer or videographer for 2 days a week. Just a good way to get in the door to being a reporter, spend 3 days on the job reporting, 2 days on the job as a photographer. Unfortunately, I dropped the camera during my second week on the job, and I bent the lens of that $20,000 Sony Betacam. That ensured that I would now become a 5-day-a-week reporter. It was under John's guidance that I learned to tell stories with video, to lose the notes and talk to the camera as if it were a person, and to be relentless in digging for stories. I treasure a handwritten note of commendation from him for award-winning work that was done on the crack cocaine epidemic in West Michigan in the late 1980s. But John's most admirable and obvious trait as a boss, as a mentor, was his amazing ability to stay calm during a crisis, which, as you can imagine, happens often in a TV newsroom. John never raised his voice. He stayed calm, he stayed collected, a trait that can take you very far. And I was not surprised when I heard a few years ago when he was named as CEO of National Public Broadcasting, from where he retired just last year. John, a teacher, a mentor, taught me the importance of not taking life so seriously, of knowing that there's always something to get freaked out about, but don't take the bait. I wonder who you have as a mentor in your life, and how you understand the dynamic nature of mentors. They're good for some periods, then you lose them and you get another. Then you lose them and get another. Who's your mentor today? Who is waiting to teach you more about what God wants you to learn on your journey? For John, he taught me to trust that all will be well, in all manner of things, all will be well. In this morning's gospel, you may have noticed your bulletin illustration. Did you like that illustration? I think it's wonderful. It's simple and it's right to the point. And it's of Jesus and the disciples getting on a boat during their ministry journey. They're on this boat and Jesus is there with several seasoned fishermen. Did you notice Jesus called fishermen to be his disciples? Many of them. He had a tax guy and a couple others. Now when a storm pops up, that's so scary that even these fishermen are losing it. You know it's a bad storm. I remember being on the airplane once, and there was about a 75-year-old flight attendant who'd been flying for 35, 45 years. She had a lot of years under her belt. We went through turbulence, and when I looked at her and she looked worried, I knew I had to look worried. Imagine the same thing on this boat. Unable to contain themselves, the disciples awaken Jesus, who is, according to the text, asleep on a cushion. One translation says Jesus was relaxing on the cushion. Yes, the world is going crazy. Life is threatened. Fear and confusion reign. And what's God's response? Chilling on the cushion. He stills the water. He gives a lecture. Do you think I brought you this far to abandon you? Have faith. Don't worry. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23 is one of my favorite verses. It says this: "Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who has promised is faithful." Many of us are in the midst of a storm this morning. The sky is dark. The wind is howling, the waves are crashing, and teacher Jesus is giving you and me a wordless lesson, hoping we've caught what's being taught. And you know what it is. He's chilling on the cushion. So many of the things you and I have been through, we look back at our worry and our anxiety, and we say, why was I so worried? Why was I so anxious? Because Jesus has found a way to calm that storm. And God will find a way in our lives as well, more than likely. Friends, thanks to the faithfulness of the good teachers and mentors in our lives, this is a lesson God has given us through them. Our best teachers help us set aside the fear by equipping us with the knowledge, with the encouragement you and I need to make a difference. Here's to Mrs. Price, Mrs. Yurkevich, Brother Kappas, John Lansing. I hope you'll add your own, and all of the teachers who have loved us and have learned us. Thanks be to God, who has used you to make us who we are today. Round of applause for our teachers.